Good morning, everyone. We have on stage the Breizh Izel Orchestra, and we're going to perform you some Finnish and French folk music songs. The first songs are called Yksi, ruusu on kasvanut Laaksossa, followed by Pour rejouir la compagnie, which is a French folk song. And then we're going to end with a Bretonese song called Gwerz vezhinerien. Sorry about my French, hopefully you understand.
so much, Antti Paalanen and our friend from Brittany. We are talking about sustainability here today in this seminar. This is a great example of communication between different cultures, and in that way, good example of social sustainability, cultural sustainability. Thank you once again. Very nice to be here. My name is Matti Hakamäki. I'm director of Finnish Folk Music Institute. Welcome to the seminar. This seminar is called Culture 2030 Campaign, Global Impact Through Community Actions. And this is Kaustinen ICH Seminar 2024. This is third time we have had these Kaustinen ICH seminars here at the festival. So very much welcome. We will be talking about intangible cultural heritage, we will be talking about culture, and we will be talking about sustainable development goals. So future, impact, and what role do we have here as practitioners or bearers or artists? What kind of responsibility and impact can we have in the sustainable future? We have great speakers here today, and we will have also a nice discussion, a panel discussion in the end. But in the beginning, I will welcome here Martin Sundin. He's the chief of general director of ISOF organization, which is behind the implementation of the 2003 convention in Sweden. And you have now a great experience. You have been 4 years in the committee of this convention, which means that he has been in the center of the action the last years, and we will hear about the experiences from Martin, and then also about intangible cultural heritage. Please, let's keep applause.
Try to find my presentation. Thank you, Matti, and what a wonderful start for this seminar, this musical performance. As Matti said, I'm the Director General of the Institute for Language and Folklore, or even though Chief sounds better somehow. But, okay, now the presentation is visible. And I've been instructed to keep my presentation short but sweet, so I hope I can achieve the short part anyhow. So, as Matti said, we will be discussing the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. And I think many of you are acquainted with this. It is a plan of action addressing the 3 dimensions of sustainability: economic, social, and environmental sustainability through 17 sustainability goals. And we have a campaign to create an 18th goal, but we will get back to that later on. As highly independent spheres of action. And if this works, I'll show you a short YouTube clip. short clip of the 17 SDGs. Now we will be talking about intangible cultural heritage today. We've been talking about it the whole week. So intangible cultural heritage, or the ICH, is defined as traditions, rituals, and practices that communities recognize as part of their cultural heritage. And examples of these traditions are oral traditions, performing arts, social practices, rituals, festive events, and knowledge about nature and the universe. Now, to recognize the importance of this, the UN, or the UNESCO, has decided in 2003 on the Convention for the Safeguarding of the Intangible Cultural Heritage. And in Article 1 of this convention, you can see that the purposes are to safeguard the intangible cultural heritage, to ensure respect for the cultural heritage of the communities, groups, and individuals concerned, and to raise awareness of the local, national levels of the importance of the intangible cultural heritage, and of ensuring mutual appreciation thereof, and to provide for international cooperation and assistance, last but not least. Now, the ICH and the SDGs are in many ways connected, of course. In the 2030 agenda, it refers to sustainability as development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And transmitted from generation to generation, this living heritage, or the ICH, is a source of community-based resilience in itself, which can be a driver of sustainable development in many different ways. And I will go into that soon. The SDGs are emphasized in the Convention in lots of ways. In the Article 2.1 of the Convention, you could see that for the purposes of the Convention, consideration would be given solely to such intangible cultural heritage that is compatible with existing international human rights instruments, as well as the requirements of mutual respect among communities, groups, and individuals, and of sustainable development. And as you can see from the Chapter 6 of the Operational Directives to the Convention, to implement the Convention, all state parties shall consider sustainabilities when they are making listings and working on a national level. And here are some examples of how ICH can contribute to achieving the SDGs. I've given 6 examples out of the 17 goals. First of all, it's the no poverty goal. For example, to drive local economies by promoting tourism and creating jobs and fostering community development. And the SDG 4, which is quality education. You could promote inclusive and equitable quality education through the transmission of traditional knowledge and skills, which is the core of the ICH in many ways. And also, when it comes to gender equality, to highlight the role of women in society in different ways. And under SDG 8, when it comes to work and economic growth, the ICH can contribute to sustainable economic growth by creating jobs in traditional sectors such as crafts, but also in culture as music, dance, and other cultural expressions. And under SDG 11, when it comes to sustainable cities and communities, to strengthen the social fabric of communities, fostering a sense of belonging and identity. And I think that has been stressed in many ways when we have discussions within the committee of the convention. And last but not least, when it comes to climate action, many of the elements that are listed has to do with agricultural practices and knowledge. And those traditional practices about the local ecosystems can contribute to climate resilience and adaptations. Now, the UNESCO has provided quite a few resources if you want to learn more about how the ICH and the SDGs interconnect. There are training materials on intangible cultural heritage and sustainable development. And there's also a toolbox with case studies on ICH and sustainable development that you could find on the website. And there are also brochures, exhibitions, and so on and so forth. So, in short, thank you.
Thank you very much, Martin. Very clear presentation. Now we're on the track what we are going to be talking about. And now our head speaker or keynote speaker, John Crowley. I will ask you to come here next. John Crowley is a private UNESCO consultant at the moment, but has a vast experience in the field of sustainable development and has been working a long time in UNESCO and is one of the masterminds behind this Culture 2030 Goal campaign, which has been going on for quite some time and which is kind of the place where the reflection about these connections, culture and SDGs, has been on the table in many, many cases. So, please, John, great to have you here.
Thank you very much, Matti. Good morning to everyone. Being originally from England, I am contractually obliged to start with a joke. You know that, every English speaker must. So since I'm the keynote speaker, I need to give you the key. So the key is F sharp minor. Can you please all get your fingers in place? A very soulful key, particularly played on the guitar. So in F sharp minor, why would anyone active in the culture sector at the grassroots level care about an international culture goal, the SDG 18 that Martin referred to and which I'll come back to? That ultimately is the question for this seminar, because we're talking precisely about impact, global impact achieved at the community level. You may feel, as people active in this area, whether in the room or online, that what happens in New York is maybe interesting in a conceptual, theoretical way, but pretty distant from what really matters. I think there's some truth in this judgment, but it's also a bit narrow, and I'll try to explain both what kind of truth there is and in what ways it is narrow. Actually, when people are asked whether they care about the global framework with respect to the specific activities in various parts of the culture sector at the grassroots or community level, they seem to be saying that they actually do care about international recognition, both because it's recognition of the importance of what they do and because it provides a framework for things that they might want to do within their own practice or in conjunction with others. And when United Cities and Local Governments, which is driving the campaign for a culture goal, did a survey on this in 2022, which I was tasked at the time with interpreting and analysing the results of, several hundred, about 500 respondents from various sectors in various countries answered massively, 90%, that they did feel that a culture goal would be important. for their activities. Even though their activities in libraries or in music associations or in the visual arts or in social inclusion through artistic practices or any one of a million other things were actually already happening and clearly didn't depend on the existence of a culture goal because there isn't one for the moment. Now, you could say that was a slightly biased sample. This was a sample of stakeholders often connected to international federations who might be biased towards the idea of a culture goal because in a sense it was the campaign consulting campaign stakeholders. And maybe there's some truth in that. Hence the importance of this discussion, which is reaching out to people who may not be aware of the existence of a campaign and are certainly not necessarily organically connected to it. In order to answer this question, I'd like to focus on impact, which is the subject of our seminar this morning. There are other ways of addressing the issue, and in some ways they're important, and I'll say a couple of words about them before I move on to the question of impact. So, when discussing impact, the issue is not to correct mistakes made between 2012, the UN Conference on Sustainable Development, which was held in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil, and 2015, the moment when the UN General Assembly adopted the 2030 Agenda, which Martin summarized a few minutes ago. Though mistakes were made, a number of major mistakes, I think, that have consequences for where we stand today and help to understand why culture was not included, as it could have been, in the Sustainable Development Agenda at the time. But the fact that mistakes were made then doesn't mean that it's appropriate to correct them now. That's a separate issue. But since I refer to mistakes, let me mention two that I think are easily traceable factually. You can show that they were made. In other words, people considered options and chose what with hindsight appear to be the wrong ones. And secondly, there are criteria that explain why they were the wrong ones in hindsight. A first mistake, which was part of UNESCO's strategy back then, and was adopted for what seemed at the time to be good reasons, was to try to promote the importance of culture for sustainable development through the framework of the cultural and creative economy, with arguments about the significance for economic prosperity, growth, jobs, skills, and so on, of the cultural and creative economy, with the headline figure, which many of you perhaps have heard, that the potential for this economy is 7% of GDP, and basically every country where it currently represents less than 7% of GDP has an economic incentive to improve its performance. And this is true as far as it goes, though the 7% figure has been much criticized by specialists in this area. But the difficulty is that much of what really matters about culture, including particularly in the field of intangible cultural heritage, doesn't actually fit within that cultural economy framework. Of course, you can show that World Heritage listings under the 1972 Convention, listings of buildings and sites, promote tourism, which in turn creates jobs. Of course, you can show that putting on the representative list intangible cultural heritage also promotes economic activities in connection with that heritage and perhaps drives tourism. But much that is of crucial significance about culture, that people in culture care about, and I'll extend this even to people not necessarily directly involved in the culture sector in a moment, doesn't necessarily produce jobs and growth and GDP. And that doesn't make it any less valuable. So the cultural economy framing was a narrow framing with respect to culture. In addition, in terms of the logic of the SDGs, it was a sectoral framework. And the SDGs were designed not to be sectoral, but thematic. Now you could say that there are some sectors that creep in various places. There's an SDG about energy, for instance, and you could say that energy is a sector or a cluster of sectors. Maybe. The health sector, maybe. and maybe you can call education a sector, but that's very misleading because education is much broader than the education sector in an economic or institutional sense. But most of the SDGs were deliberately designed not to be sectoral. So if you define culture as a sector, then it means that a bit like, you know, transport or construction or industry, heavy industry or petrochemicals or whatever, it shouldn't be in the SDGs, it should be somewhere else. So I think that with hindsight, even though the reasons at the time were probably very defensible, now appears to have been a mistake. And indeed, the work the campaign has been doing, I don't know if you've seen the document published in 2022 at the time of the World Conference on Cultural Policies, Mondiakult, which was held in Mexico, and which is titled A Culture Goal is Essential for Our Common Future. It describes the spirit in which the work is now being done, and also gives an outline draft of what a goal could look like. And it's very clear, and is explicitly made clear in the document, that what is being talked about is not the cultural economy or even the culture sector. It is culture, with all aspects of its importance. The second mistake, again, easier to see with hindsight perhaps, though many people said it at the time, is pillarization. Both Matti and Martin referred to the pillars of sustainable development, of which there are three, dating back to the declaration adopted at the end of the Rio conference in 2012, and then enshrined in the 2030 agenda: economic, social, and environmental. With the idea that sustainability, as described in the previous presentation, meeting the needs of today without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their needs, has three dimensions that, at least analytically, and perhaps also practically for policy purposes, can be pillarized. In other words, held separate and turned into what are effectively silos. Pillar is sometimes used without the visual image of what a pillar looks like, but it's actually very difficult to use the word without immediately thinking of what a pillar is. And pillars are separate, vertical, and essentially parallel. Though, as we know, the Greeks built temples where the pillars aren't quite parallel to make them look more beautiful. But still, at least within the scale of the building, the pillars never meet. They are separate. And of course, this doesn't work. It doesn't work conceptually, and it doesn't work practically. Social and economic as separate pillars, it's no secret why this was done. It was to ensure that business could buy into the 2030 agenda. So keeping the economy separate was a tactical move, which as a tactic was perhaps very defensible, but conceptually it makes no sense. One word, work. Is work a social category or an economic category? The whole point is it's both. It is where the social and the economic meet. And that's not a radical socialist argument. It's equally true whatever economic paradigm you subscribe to. Similarly, economic and environmental as separate categories, in an agenda that emphasizes the key importance of climate change for the future of humanity. Climate change is inseparably an economic issue, since greenhouse gas emissions are driven, among other things, by technology-supported prosperity, and an environmental issue because it's about the physical independence of the planetary system. So pillarization was a neat idea, but ultimately a mistake. And it creates a difficulty for culture. The campaign is officially committed to the idea of culture as a fourth pillar of sustainable development. But when you look at the importance of culture, it's not a pillar, not really, because it cuts across all three of the other pillars. And my own argument, but this is just me, not the campaign, is that culture is actually the way to depillarize the sustainable development agenda by showing that the connections are much more powerful than the separations, and that nothing in the agenda actually depends on that division into pillars. It is literally useless. If you drop it, everything else remains exactly the same. And pillars are supposed to hold something up. If you have pillars that are holding nothing, as every architect knows, you can get rid of them and make a nice, open, integrated space, which is very fashionable these days, where no one wants a separate kitchen and everyone wants the kitchen to be connected to the living room. Well, that's exactly what depillarization can achieve, on condition they're not actually pillars. So, the point isn't really to discuss all of this. I'm just mentioning it. Nor is the issue here to discuss the importance of culture. Not because culture isn't important for sustainable development, in addition to being important in its own right, but because nothing in the idea of a culture goal really depends on that. It's clear that there are things that are important that are not explicitly in the Sustainable Development Agenda because they are underpinnings or frameworks. The best possible example is human rights. There's no SDG for human rights. And yet the whole of the 2030 Agenda is human rights based. So human rights are not being denied or negated by not having a special goal. So culture is not inherently being denied or negated by not having a separate goal. However, I would emphasize, and this will be important in discussing the issues at the grassroots or community level, that the importance of culture for goals that don't look cultural is actually essential to the importance of culture. In other words, culture is important not just for its own sake, but also because of the connections it establishes with the other parts of the agenda. You remember the little film which cleverly didn't show them in numerical sequence, which allowed connections to appear. And I'll talk about the one that I'm most familiar with because it's the area where a lot of my professional activities take place, which is the connection between culture and climate resilience. At one level, climate resilience is not primarily about culture. It's about understanding planetary interconnections, so it's a certain kind of scientific challenge, and it's about developing and rolling out technologies in the broad sense, including social technologies, that can enable human life and human needs to be met with less impact on fragile planetary systems. And that's what resilience is, maintaining the capacity within the system to respond to uncertain future developments at the climate level. But as soon as you start talking about rolling out technologies and looking at the social dimensions of technological use, and as soon as you realize that everything is a technology, not just shiny steel things with lots of wires and processors inside, then you realize that climate resilience is essentially, and not accidentally, a cultural issue, because it's embedded in the three characteristic dimensions of culture in general, which are beliefs, values, and behavior, practices. If the map of what culture is as human practice, and what culture is as an object of understanding for certain disciplines that analyze culture and contribute to its development through their critical thrust, then that conjunction of beliefs, values, and behavior shapes every kind of technological issue that we're talking about. We were talking yesterday evening with Leena about tar, and how tar is produced, and how tar is produced by treating wood in a certain way and heating it in such a way that the resin from the wood flows out, producing a substance that can be used, for instance, to waterproof wooden buildings and wooden vessels for the sea or the river. Tar is a very old technology. Archaeology shows that it's been produced and used in those ways for many, many thousands of years. And there's now a discussion about whether it should be banned as being unsustainable. Tar is also a cultural practice, which is embedded in the ways of life of peoples of forest peoples, basically, because it's a wood-based product, that have developed practices around tar that are not just technologically useful because they produce a substance that can be used, but also culturally significant because there are practices and beliefs and behaviors and local knowledge that are embedded in them. This is where intangible cultural heritage is perhaps one of the best connectors between the apparently non-cultural parts of the Sustainable Development Agenda and the role of culture within it. So, let's assume we have a culture goal for the moment. I'll come back to the nature of that assumption a little bit later. What would the benefits that the existence what would be the benefits that the existence of such a culture goal, perhaps similar to what was drafted by the campaign in the 2022 document that I referred to, at the community level? In other words, you're a community level actor in cultural production or education or research into cultural practices. What would you gain from it? And I think there are 4 benefits of the existence of a goal that can quite easily be identified and which are related to benefits that are already shown from the existence of the SDG agenda as it is with its 17 goals in various parts of society. Those 4, and I'll list them first then describe them briefly, are 1, a shared language, 2, a framework for innovation, 3, a foundation, and 4, an integrator. So let me give a little description of what I mean by each of these terms. First, a shared language is one that avoids wasted energy in discussing words and definitions and concepts. Of course, there's some loss in this because some of those concepts would deserve discussion. For instance, why do we talk about sustainable development when the definition of sustainable development actually has nothing to do with development? It's about sustainability, the relation between the ability to meet present needs and the implications of what we do in the present for the ability of others to meet their needs in the future. And we might add, within the present, the ability of others to meet their needs based on what we do to meet our needs. So there's a distributive dimension even within the present that is explicit. And we know politically why the word development is there, because it was connected to debates about the right to development at UN level, because of the worry on the part of many developing countries that environmental concerns would be used to limit their capacity to develop their economies and societies. The so-called kicking away the ladder syndrome, which is the title of a book by a prominent Korean economist called Ha-Joon Chang. Kicking away the ladder, I don't know if the image is clear to everyone, is the idea that there's a ladder, there's somewhere everyone wants to go. Some people have gone up the ladder, got up into the attic, and then kicked down the ladder so that no one else can join them. Because there probably isn't space in the attic for everyone. And this was the concern, that development is effectively the right to keep the ladder and to get into the attic, and that the environment might be used as a pretext to justify kicking away the ladder. All of these discussions are important, all of them need to take place, but they can get in the way of practical action. Because if you spend your whole time discussing words, you probably won't get to things. And anyone who's ever done politics, even at the lowest grassroots level, knows that the best way to prevent any political movement from achieving success is to start fighting about words. At some point, you have to agree pragmatically on a shared language in order to move forward. The SDGs offer precisely that shared language, and experience since 2015 shows that this works. And the best example of how it works is in the corporate world. Corporations are required at least to pretend to care about the SDGs. So they pretend to care. It's what we call greenwashing in the broad sense. But greenwashing has consequences. Because in order to greenwash credibly, you need to actually learn the language in which you're doing the greenwashing. And learning the language has consequences for how you operate your business, even if you don't fully realize it. not least because it allows external stakeholders, consumer movements for instance, to analyze your reports on the basis of a shared language of sustainable development. It allows them to intervene in annual general meetings of shareholders to challenge your corporate practices in the name of sustainable development. If you look at oil company AGMs in the past few years, they have been systematically disrupted by activists. Activists who are working with shareholders or who may themselves be individual shareholders, even at a very small scale. If you buy even one share of Shell or BP, you can turn up to the AGM and you can demand the floor, which you won't get. But by demanding it, you're creating an event. Historically, mobilization against oil companies was very fragmented. It has become consolidated around the shared language of the SDGs, which the companies themselves cannot simply reject because they make it the basis of their own corporate social responsibility policies. So shared languages have consequences. In addition, shared languages facilitate cooperation. Of course, translating the SDGs into different languages creates ambiguities. There's no French word, for instance, that really captures the English word sustainability. So the French called it durabilité, which doesn't mean the same thing, and which sounds very strange in French. And other languages may have similar kinds of difficulties in translating. But nonetheless, it means that different people in different sectors with different professional experiences and interests and different vernacular languages can communicate around targets and even indicators in ways that facilitate cooperation. There's some loss, it's a simplification, but it's also an opportunity. And of course, many funding opportunities depend on the ability to talk SDG fluently, particularly at the indicator level. But conversely, once you've learned to speak the language, it facilitates your access to funding streams, for instance at EU level, where it's basically mandatory to show in what way your project, whether it's a research project or an action project, contributes to the achievement of the SDGs. Secondly, a framework for innovation. Many areas that are important, particularly in the area of culture, are as yet underdeveloped. It's very clear intuitively that there are connections between cultural practices at grassroots level and preserving biodiversity. The role of indigenous people has been long recognized as important in this connection. But I don't think anyone would argue that there is an action plan available for anyone to use that explains exactly how cultural practices can support biodiversity preservation or even restoration where biodiversity is degraded, as it is in many places. There are ideas, there are networks, there are processes of sharing, but certainly not something that's already been fully worked out. And one of the most important reasons goes to the heart of intangible cultural heritage, which is context dependency, and in particular place dependency. There's no general recipe to protect biodiversity, because biodiversity is specific to each context in which it needs to be protected. So there's lots of scope here for innovation. And that innovation can be facilitated if it's clearly anchored in a set of goals that are recognized as important and relevant, and indicators to assess progress which are recognized as technically solid. Third, the shared language of the SDGs offers a foundation on which to build. In principle, the SDGs are not the limit of what is to be achieved, but the indispensable baseline against which achievement should be measured. Now, this often isn't the case. In the corporate world in particular, the SDGs are seen as essentially what is to be achieved. You would never go beyond them because there's no mandate to go beyond them. But in spirit, that's not the purpose at all. particularly because the SDGs are an international consensual framework, and therefore they're necessarily a bit minimal. The idea, and this is certainly at the heart of what we're trying to do with the campaign, or what the campaign is trying to do, including with my technical input, is to clearly define a culture goal as something that sets a minimum shared agenda with an open invitation to go beyond it, based on specific circumstances and contexts, opportunities and resources. And in this respect, at the grassroots level, the ability to build on a core mandate for achievement and to show ways of going beyond it in particular contexts is obviously very valuable. And this also underlines the value of grassroots engagement in the process itself to develop a goal. And I'll describe in a few minutes in conclusion what we're actually doing now towards the next Mondial Conference, the next World Conference on Cultural Policies, which will take place at the end of September 2025 in Barcelona. So September 2025 is very close, but it does give time. It gives about 9 months of space for genuinely new work to take the agenda forward, producing documents, but also engagement in what perhaps member states, or at least their culture ministers, could adopt in Barcelona in 14 months. Now, of course, if you decide to engage, and you, the audience here, anyone online, anyone watching the replay, if you decide to engage in the development of a culture goal with its targets, its indicators, and the outline of the action plan to achieve it, then you might devote time and energy to making proposals that will not end up in the final document, because the final document needs to be a consensus. The final document, as proposed by the campaign, needs to be a consensus within the campaign. There's no way everything can be included. In addition, anything adopted at the political level will depend on politics, and some things that are consensus within the campaign might be too controversial to be picked up politically. These things happen. But nothing will be lost. Everything that is developed through the campaign becomes the basis for action by the stakeholders themselves. And finally, an integrator. For all the reasons that I've just mentioned, the existence of a culture goal would help to break down barriers within the culture sector, which is quite fragmented, because culture covers a very wide range of professional practices, a very wide range of kinds of institutions and stakeholders. And between the culture sector and areas in which culture is essential to the achievement of the other SDGs, which is all the other SDGs. In some cases, the barriers have started to be broken down. Climate resilience is an example. In other areas, I don't think they have at all. I'm not sure the connections with poverty eradication, or health, or gender equality, or livable cities have really been sufficiently developed so far, even though intuitively there are obvious connections with a range of cultural issues. So then the question becomes, what if a goal is never actually adopted? The existence of a culture goal would be valuable. Does that mean that the absence of a culture goal would be regrettable, or perhaps even a disaster? And of course, there's no guarantee, however good the technical work, however strong the stakeholder engagement, that a culture goal will be adopted. Politics is uncertain. The timeline is very, very tight. The reason culture wasn't in the decision of the UN General Assembly in September 2015 is that it wasn't in the outcome document of Rio in June 2012. That's how the international system works. Effectively, the door was already closed 3 years in advance of the final decision. And that's going to happen again. So time is actually pretty short. 2025 is a key moment where either the the idea of a culture goal will become obvious to everyone, or it risks being unachievable. And of course the campaign is very aware of this, hence the call to action in the next year or so to build the dynamic for September 2025. Furthermore, there's no guarantee that the SDG agenda itself will survive in that form. The UN system is under pressure, as you know, so there could be a breakdown of the international system. We can't guarantee that it will continue on stable, predictable tracks. And in addition, there's one criticism of the SDGs that could strongly influence the coming post-2030 agenda, or any changes in advance of 2030, which is the criticism that unlike the earlier Millennium Development Goals, the Sustainable Development Goals don't prioritize. And they don't. They were designed not to prioritize. They were designed to be comprehensive and to offer effectively a menu from which governments and other stakeholders could choose their own priorities. And this was a political requirement for the achievement of a comprehensive agenda. But maybe we should be picking a limited number of priorities and focusing on those, such as the eradication of extreme poverty, or the achievement of universal primary education, particularly for girls, and so on. And you could sort of go back to the Millennium Development Goals in 2000, look at the priorities defined in them. There were only 8 Millennium Development Goals, and they were much more focused, and say we should come back to that, instead of having rather blah-blah discussions, particularly under SDG 16, for instance, on peace, justice, and inclusion, which is so broad and so weak at the indicator level that maybe it's not worth having. So there is a possibility that instead of being broadened, the agenda might be narrowed down. And if it was narrowed down, obviously, there wouldn't be space for culture. What I would like to argue is that essentially all the benefits, all the impacts that I've referred to earlier, remain achievable on the basis of the goal that emerges from the campaign or from other similar initiatives separate from the campaign or related to it. It is the existence of the goal, not its adoption, that matters. This is what we've been calling the shadow goal strategy, and maybe some of you have heard me previously refer to this in other presentations. In other words, once you have a goal that everyone who cares about culture is committed to, whether it's adopted at the intergovernmental level or not is, of course, important, symbolically and practically, but not decisive, because you can still use the goal to act at national level and at community level. It's the dynamic around the formulation of those targets and the formulation of those indicators and the agreement to work together to achieve those targets in terms of those indicators that makes the difference. This sounds paradoxical, but it's not. It means that a successful campaign will actually ensure impact at the community level, even if the international system at the intergovernmental level, for whatever reason, is unable or unwilling to adopt a culture goal. This sounds very like a win-win strategy. You create the conditions to favour intergovernmental adoption, but at the same time you make intergovernmental adoption optional in terms of a successful outcome. Now, this may sound a bit too good to be true, but I think that at least potentially it's a valid argument, though it depends on the scale of investment and engagement. So what I would like to encourage you to do is to be part of building the shadow goal, and then be part of the shadow movement, which, regardless of what happens in New York, will actually shape the connection between culture and sustainable development. Starting now, to 2030, and beyond 2030. And just to close with some practical indications, we're currently discussing, under the leadership mainly of UCLG, but other other members of the coalition, of course, very involved in the discussion, as to what could be a timeline for practical actions to move towards the kind of objective that we need for Mondial 2022. And what will be key in this regard is, I think, two phases of work. One, a phase of work that starts now and runs to the end of this year, which is a phase of consultation which needs to be broader than it was in 2022, involving more stakeholders, and at the same time needs to be more focused, using the draft goal published in 2022 as the basis for criticism, amendment, refinement, and so on. This is open to anyone who wants to be involved, and the more people are involved in it, the more successful it will be. In parallel, and this is subject, among other things, to resources, so we need to raise resources. I'll be handing out the hat at the end of the talk. That's a joke, obviously. I don't have a hat. I'll be very happy to take checks, credit cards, cash, anything, Bitcoin, whatever you have with you. Subject to resources, we need some very serious technical work to develop indicators that are relevant, feasible, and powerful for supporting the achievement of the targets as written into the goal. And that's something that will run probably to spring 2025. And again, something that those of you familiar with indicator frameworks at international or national level, each UNESCO convention has its indicator frameworks, for instance, might wish to contribute to by pointing to things that can be used as they are or adapted, or pointing to areas where new developments are necessary, and perhaps indications as to who the key experts are who could participate in such additional development. My time is up, so I will stop with that call for engagement, and will be very happy, of course, to discuss with you the implications of everything I've been saying. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Crowley. Now I will ask Kaustinen Näppärit to the stage. You can prepare yourself, please. We have a local folk music group or music pedagogical group here, children and youth, presenting another practical example of living heritage and sustainability. Thank you very much, John. It was a very clear and very interesting presentation once again. We will now have more understanding about the depths of the whole subject. I think we will have a chance to reflect this on the panel discussion. So Kaustinen was inscribed to the UNESCO 2003 convention list 2021, and a big part of the nomination was that the tradition goes from generation to generation, and now we have a great example here about in real life to see how this happens. So Näppärit group is the local fiddle playing group, which aim is also to ensure that we have this tradition in the future, but also in the way that music is for everybody. It's everybody's right. We play together, we have fun when we play and sing, and it's intergenerational, and it's children and grown-ups together. So we have Siiri Virkkala and Anni Järvelä at least here on the stage, who are the teachers, and maybe some other ones that I can't see, but I will give the floor to you. Olkaa hyvä. Thank you, Kiitos Näppärit. Thank you very much, Näppärit. I was told that Siri and the other ones told me that today to the Näppärit, to the seminar, the Kaustinen Näppärit will come, but not everyone, just a small group. And so this is the small group, and we can only imagine what is the bigger one then. And we have the stage still here, it seems. Good. And so, next guest here is Markku Wilenius. Very delighted to have Martin here in Kaustinen and John here, but also Markku. It's great that you had the time to join our seminar. He's a professor of future studies at the University of Turku and a UNESCO chair of learning for transformation and planetary futures. And we will hear insights about sustainability and future. Please.
Okay, very good. Matti, shall I? Yeah, I'm audible. First I have to really to thank the organizer for inviting me to this occasion. I think it was almost hilarious last evening to go through these different stages and be a part of creating culture in different ways, from singing along to dancing along and everything between. Maybe tonight I'm also playing along, I don't know about that, but I think that's the culture at work, because culture for me means that something is active. It's a form of act rather than a form of stability. And that is also something that I want to bring here in my short presentation, when I try to sort of pick up some of the key connections when it comes to the sustainability, the future, and culture. And in my role in the field of future studies, it's sort of a pertinent issue that whenever we talk about the future, we're not just kind of trying to reach out and to build better and creating more and more and more. There is an aspect of ethics in all of that discussion and action as well. And sort of has brought me also to these areas of sustainability. I think I was here for the first time 2004 when I had been working with what the culture means in the society, and particularly in economics. Those were the days where we were talking a lot about the creative economy and all of that. But I wanted to start actually of talking about this kind of ecological dimensions of sustainability, because I think it's sort of frames a lot of our discussion, and it's also not just the ultimate goal of the SDGs, but also the kind of the issue around which the whole debate and discussion about the sustainability had actually started ever since, I would say, Club of Rome, which I'm also part of, made this report, Limits to the Growth, which is that, well, we have two ways to go when we look at the future, and one of the key indicators is, of course, what happens with the greenhouse gases. And what is sort of striking is that we seem to be at the crossroads here, really. What is the top of the path? The existing kind of business as usual scenario looks really dire, with a lot of implication. I'm not going there too much, but to say that if you want to divert, that needs a cultural change that cannot take place unless we really talk about the cultural change, not just the technology that is there, not just the politics, not just the economics. It's about the cultural change, because otherwise there is no change. And to emphasize where we actually are with this right now is that, and I did my PhD on climate change somewhere in '97 about, you know, the economics and the politics around that, and the sort of a sociological framing of that. When we look at it today, we see Earth moving, or at least we see the climate moving. We look at the latest data to show that actually there are too many warmest records in the first 4 months of this year, whether you talk about Europe, whether you talk about Africa, whether you talk about South America, and the extremes that are increasing rapidly in all around the world. So there is a systemic change that is taking place on the global scale when it comes to the climate. This was not the case in '97 when I did my PhD, but certainly this is now the case when we talk about as of now. So that is obviously a framing thing that we need to be kind of not just focus on that, but this is kind of underlying about every discussion that we have about the sustainability. Now, when it comes to the role of the culture, I think John already put that out very nicely that, well, it's actually our values, belief systems, the preferences are defined to some extent or quite extent about the culture. And it sort of tells us what is important, what is essential, and what is not. And since that's the case, it becomes all the more important to think that what are the types of forms of cultures that gets supported? Because there are some parts of the culture, let's say modern material consumption culture, that should get actually pushed aside. So not all cultures are good cultures, there are bad cultures in this frame. And so we need to be thinking what are those particular cultures that really needs our support and which actually brings the human aspect to all of the discussion, which is that if we think that this is all about actually how the cultures that are generated by humans act with or without accordance with nature, then it's obviously the question is that how do we then think about those behaviors that could make this difference to take this very different trajectory in our world development. So in that sense, we go to the basics because we know that what there is down at the bottom are our belief systems, our idea of a human being itself, and which constitutes, as I see it, it constitutes the freedom and responsibility. We cannot be responsible if we don't have a freedom, but it cannot be free if we are not responsible. So that means that the culture, as I said in the beginning, is something what I see strongly, that culture has a power when it gets activated. So the power of culture in yesterday evening in Kaustinen is so visible, so tangible, that this, what we may call also intangible culture, becomes very tangible. And so it is when the culture sort of shows its power, isn't it? So, and now I come to the end of my short presentation. What does this actually lead to? What does this type of the storylines actually tells us? So, there, I think the most important aspect is to really to understand that culture is at the center. A culture is at the center because we cannot add any strong connection between our behavior, which is based on our practices, thus to our culture, and then thus it leads to whether those behaviors are sustainable or not, unless we're talking about the culture. One thing I would like to I was waiting to hear from John, but perhaps this comes in the panel. I would like to hear what is the definition of this goal, if that, when and if that to be proposed. Because that, of course, also tells a lot about what is the underlying kind of agenda and the agenda there, but maybe we can come to that back in our panel. And so, when I think about this agenda, about the importance of bringing this cultural goal as a part of the SDGs, for me, it is another way to say that, not only what John said very nicely, that this is not about the cultural economy, this is about the culture in action, which happens in human communities everywhere. But also that that is the part when we are actually talking about how to regenerate something, how to build a new something, how to build something that does not exist. As living culture always is, it finds its new forms. We heard yesterday these two guys that were playing in the Mondo new songs, a lot of new songs, and not just the old songs. So this is how the culture gets renewed. And that needs to be kind of a spirit of this whole, I think, the whole of the SDG agenda. That is really about renewing the way we see the world and how we see the human role as a part of that. And then finally, I think when we think about the possible impact of this cultural goal to the overall SDGs, I think it's very important to emphasize this role of that we need to be talking about human behavior. We need to be talking about that actually we create this world every day anyway, but how conscious, how aware we are of those implications, those consequences of our own actions defines what we're going to get. I finish with this, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the visit and thank you for the presentation. Next we will go, we have Annika Lyytikäinen, Head of Public Affairs from Kulta organization, and the topic is the Culture 2030 Goal Campaign Finland, that we have had honor also here with the Finnish Folk Music Institute to be participating and plan together with Annika. Please, Annika, the floor is yours.
Thank you and good day everyone. My name is Annika Lyytikäinen and as Matti told, I'm the Head of Public Affairs at Kulta ry. We are the national umbrella organization for Finnish Culture and Arts Associations. It's lacking the plural. And the purpose of our pretty young organization, the organization was funded in 2018, is to advance the overall economic growth, operating conditions and social standing of the arts and culture industry, which practically in our small organizations means lobbying for better, mainly national cultural policy. We pretty recently renewed our own strategy of our organization, and the current strategy bears the title Culture is a Solution, and we kind of want to advocate for all of the different challenges in society which actually culture could be the solution, or at least one of the solutions for, and so is absolutely also the issue of sustainable development. And very suiting to this, the Finnish Folk Music Institute and mainly Matti then last year initiated to why not make a national campaign about this Culture Goal 2030, this big international campaign that John just was presenting, for maybe locally getting this big campaign, big international campaign a step forward and closer to practice and so on. And so we then thought this is a very good idea. Our board adopted this, the goal, also the document that John was talking about, the long title, A Culture Goal is Essential for Our Common Future, right? And then launched this campaign in early 2024 in cooperation between us and the Finnish Folk Music Institute. I'm not going to tell you again why this culture goal is important, or even less why culture is important for sustainable development, but I'm briefly trying to explain why we thought a national campaign is important and how we are making it happen. Our goal with the campaign is, and the goal adopted by our organization is, for Finland as a state to advocate for a dedicated cultural goal as part of the post-2030 Sustainable Development program, the new Agenda 2030, whatever form it will take. So we want Finland as a state to drive this goal in the UN. Why that? We Finnish people are not always so self-confident, but I think we confidently can say that Finland is considered a global leader in sustainable development, and that Finland's voice is significant in updating the post-2030 action program. Again, we can't, of course, do this alone. We need a lot of other countries on board, but Finland might be a good initiator for this goal as a country. And also, nevertheless, to create the needed ownership and practical action among the civil society, so among all culture actors and broader the whole civil society, that we think is equally important, the very high level and then the very practical grassroots level, to get everyone on board. At the very moment, or in a bit before Christmas, we translated this draft goal to Finnish and also Swedish. So if you think this has been a bit heavy and speak Finnish or Swedish, you can go read the draft goal on kulttuuritavoite.fi. Now we're starting up a working group for the campaign, which is open for any civil society organizations or actors in Finland, so please join it. You can email me or Matti or whatever if you want to join the group. We also, due to this campaign, received a seat in the Finnish Committee on Sustainable Development, which is very important, I think, for culture as a whole, even beyond this campaign. I think this, the last bullet tells about how easy to adopt, how easy to like, how likable this goal is, because just roughly a month after launching this campaign, we had the Finnish president elections, and then a candidate, now the president of Finland, Alexander Stubb, actually in one of the very last president debates lifted up this cultural goal as a thing that Finland could in fact strive for in the UN and the international cooperation. So actually this very fast got very high up on very high level, and of course we wish for the president now to also deliver on this what he said in the campaign. Also one thing to add, we've had very good discussions with the Finnish youth delegates to UNESCO, so who are part of the Finnish delegations to the UNESCO top meetings representing the youth, and it's indeed very important also to have the representatives of our young people on board. If you are Finnish and want to join the campaign, you're very welcome to do so. You can either join the working group or then spread the message on social media or your own organization, or so. There will be more and more information coming up on the website kulttuuritavoite.fi, and there you can also read the draft goal. And I think feel free anywhere in the world to copy this concept and take it even further, make it better, because as I said, Finland can't do this alone. We need a lot of other nations, other friends around the world, also as nations, to drive this goal, so it might become reality after 2030. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Annika. It has been a pleasure to have the chance to work with you at Kulta ry. Now we will go on, dear friend Leena Marsio, and we will hear about the LIVIND project and the implications on the grassroots level about combining ICH and sustainability. Leena Marsio is a senior advisor at the Finnish Heritage Agency, and the Finnish Heritage Agency is in charge of the implementation of the 2003 Convention in Finland. Please.
Thank you, Matti. Good day, everyone. Truly a pleasure to be here. I think, Matti, it's my 5th time in the Kaustinen Festival. So I've been working 10 years in Museovirasto, Museiverkets Finnish Heritage Agency, coordinating the convention. But today I will speak to you especially about the work that we do and we have done in sustainable development, and about our 3-year project, LIVIND. Creative and, no, I won't go there yet. I first want to say, how did we go into this? My brother in sustainability, Antti Paalanen, who was here just a minute ago, introduced me to the topic some like 5 years ago. I said we need to do something concrete, and this seems so difficult. It's very important, but it's also rather difficult. So we need tools in how to take this further. And we need to take this into a concrete level. So therefore, we created the wheel chart of sustainability, our first one, now in 18 languages on our website, and has spread to all continents and all over the world for different kind of communities and organizations to learn more on in terms how they are doing with sustainability and how could they do better. As the next step, we started our LIVIND project with the good funding from the Finnish Foreign Ministry, started in September 2021, focusing on those countries behind, of course, the Agenda 2030. So we work for the government and I work for this particular UNESCO convention. So how to take all these fancy words, and we see the curves we saw from Markku, and we know how difficult the situation is, and yet we tend to forget it in our everyday work. And our thought was that we need to bring this to the grassroots level. So the Agenda 2030, also the UNESCO Convention on Safeguarding Intangible Heritage, the UNESCO 2005 Convention on Diversity of Expressions, but then also the Faro Convention and the Council of Europe. So those are basically the tools and backbones that we are using in our own work. So we're going to go maybe back with John later today or in the afternoon on the discussion on the pillars, but we've been consciously emphasizing the role of culture. It's the same as with intangible heritage. If we only talk about heritage and intangible living heritage is not mentioned, it's not there. Many people still see heritage as being buildings or museum objects. In the same way, we think we need to speak about culture and cultural sustainability. But in our project, we really wanted to focus or work on all of the 4 dimensions. So how can living heritage contribute and what can we do more? Our concrete goals and then also now results as we are wrapping up the project have been to create new networks. So learning in Nordic and Baltic countries and Poland and in all of those 9 countries, together with colleagues from the governmental level, from NGOs, museums, communities, what is intangible heritage in relation to the Agenda 2030. We've been learning a lot, we've been creating projects, products and services, and now we have just recently launched a new online platform, LIVIND.fi. So we've had hundreds of people attending our webinars, workshops and learning sessions online. All of our videos are online, and we have also funded 20 different kind of pilot projects reaching for more than 1,000 people in all of those countries. So, I mean, I was also there in Mondiacut in Mexico, is it already 2 years back, with 120 cultural ministers, all each giving their 4-minute speech on culture and development. It's quite a poetry slam. And we were thinking really, what does it mean then for someone in Kaustinen, a fiddle player, or someone working with the Finnish sauna tradition? What can they do in concrete? So we decided to give small seed funding in our project to 20 different projects. So taking sustainability into action step by step in different organizations. So I'm going to quickly run through 4 of them. So for example, in Norway, folk dance supporting social sustainability by the Norwegian Center for Traditional Music and Dance. So emphasizing that dance is not just dance, but what's the role of folk dance for this town and adding to well-being, inclusion and diversity. So in concrete, it was about meetings, dance events, a 2-day seminar and a podcast. So really creating a forum and helping people to understand more what is my role in this, the role of my organization or my role as a dancer in sustainability. So, Varena Mushroom Festival in Latvia has been organized since 1987, so picking mushrooms, you would think it's really close to nature and would be really sustainable. But it was an interesting process they went through in different workshops, 2 workshops and also an expert excursion, observing what's happening in the festival and how are they doing in terms of ecological, economic, social or cultural sustainability. And through this process, creating a guidebook on how to run better the festival, and this was also translated into English and is now available online. But really concrete, what can our mushroom festival do more? Then also the Sami Council, active in all of the 3 Nordic countries. We were working with intellectual property right tools for Sami handicraft. So they have been working both with the Sami made and the Sami Duoji labels already before. There's misuse and cultural appropriation of their culture and especially of their traditional dresses and other craft items. So through our project, they could promote better the work that they've been doing, going out to the Sami winter market and also launching a campaign with a video to tell more on how can they do better. So both cultural sustainability and economic sustainability. And lastly, a podcast, Living the Heritage, coordinated by the Nordic and Baltic Network on Intangible Cultural Heritage, organized here from Kaustinen, the Finnish Folk Music Institute. So to increase knowledge and understanding about living heritage and sustainable development. So Amanda Kauran here in the photo together with Aivar Ruukkel, a boat builder from Estonia. So 3 and then also 3 in our project and then also 3 other podcasts are now online where you can learn more what is it actually in concrete. So Google Living the Heritage, and Matti probably also still has some brochures for you when we finish. Interviews from Estonia, Finland, Norway, Sweden, Kenya, Germany, Colombia and Hungary. So really, here are some examples of what can be done in concrete, and I think in the panel we'll discuss some more. But if you got really interested, go to LIVIND.fi, take some of our brochures. If you're new to Intangible Heritage, take a brochure, and Leena from Museovirasto will be happy to tell you more also after the event. And then I have some of our tools with me, which are also all available online. Everyone has to lend a hand so that the great work goes forward. So this is really definitely something we all need to work on together. Thanks a lot, and I think we continue with the program then. Thank you.
Thank you, Leena. You can stay on stage because we will continue with the panel discussion. So, Martin and John and Markku. So please join also to join us at the stage. So we will be discussing about feelings and what we have, some questions maybe that have risen in our minds. I will be also presenting the Culture Goal campaign Finland. Very nice presentation from Annika, and but you can join, of course, the discussion when if something crucial comes to mind. But welcome to the panel. We will begin with the short round. Just what have you learned so far from Markku? But from this seminar, maybe the one idea to point out what has been important or what have you learned? Please.
From this seminar?
From this seminar.
Well, actually I have learned a lot because, to be frank, I didn't know how much there is activity behind this 18 SDG and how this whole kind of so that there is a background to this, obviously, but also that there is some past, and now I sort of it occurred to me that this is now kind of not just a project, but I think this is an initiative that really tries to build a kind of not a block, but I would say a dimension which is critical to the whole idea of the SDGs, and as I think people have been saying before, this was also a part of the fact that we don't know actually in the future how the SDGs themselves are going to develop. Is a new version of that, but all in all, I think this to be more clear, and then I'm calling here also that I want to hear more about this. What would be the tangible goal framed and worded in this case that is behind this agenda? Thank you.
Yes, I think we will have a chance to discuss about that. That's very crucial, I think. And also, Markku, and to all of you, when you say that the first line, if you can point out an element of intangible cultural heritage, personally important to you, so that we remember to keep the ICH level here included, please.
Okay, I pick up something which is rather dear to me, which is there is peculiar Finnish culture concerning wooden rowboating. So rowing, souta, with a wooden boat. And there's a long tradition, and I remember from my childhood, I spent the summers where I still do, or we still do with our family, in an island off the coast of Helsinki, and we used to have this rowboat kind of competitions in the summer, and there were for different age classes, and there were lots of rowboats around. Now, our family still has a robot, which is now 35 years. We take very good care of that, and we're still growing that. But that's the only wooden robot in the whole island. So this has become a very scarce resource. But I think it's not dying in Finland, because actually these days there are, and the Finnish usually know this, there is this surkavan suursoulut. So this is happening in the western part of Finland, when they are having this the whole weekend event about the rowing. So that's also a living culture, which I find in particular being with a close affinity to me, because I love that. I love the rhythm of rowing, and it's indeed very sustainable in every possible ways.
Markku, this warms my heart, because did you know that the Nordic Klinkerboat traditions are also inscribed in UNESCO by altogether all of the Nordic countries, so we work a lot with wooden boats. I could have mentioned that, but I'm anyhow going to go into mushroom picking, because this week I saw the first photos on my social media about shantaveres. And it's definitely something that I learned in my family from my parents, that I have been also teaching to my own kids. And it's a thing that made my late summers and my autumns very special, that I can go anywhere in the Finnish forest and pick mushrooms and have them in my freezer for the winter time. And I always end up to discussions with international colleagues on mushrooms, also with these two gentlemen in the last evenings. But what have I learned today? I mean, I've been on this journey on ICH, sustainable development, for quite a while now, but I think I learned more from John, especially on what are then the benefits of the culture goal. And also, I mean, I'm a person with cultural background. I created from Sibelius Academy as an arts manager originally, and worked freelancing for 10 years in different organizations, and now 10 years in Finnish Heritage Agency. For us, culture is everything, and we are always pro-culture, and of course it should be there, but we really need to we really need the language, and we need to be able to convince others and to say why it is needed. And I also, when I got excited about the work on sustainability, was like, well, culture is not visible in the SDG because it's everywhere, yet it's visible, like mentioned 2 times, is it? And I've learned much more since then, but I mean, I first time heard John in Mexico in Mondia Code, and I'm so happy to hear more from him today.
Thank you, Matti.
Thank you. I think it's been a very interesting day, and I haven't been working with the ICH as long as Leena, but of course the discussion on sustainability, the ICH, how culture is setting its mark on all different aspects of society. Of course, that is a discussion that's been going on, but I think it was interesting to listen to John and hear more about how we need to find a common language or a way of talking about the culture. And of course that is always the case. I haven't heard about the campaign. I don't think we've it hasn't been a big issue yet in Sweden. And I also, we don't have time for debate, but I think it's interesting that you mentioned that perhaps we have too many SDGs now. We need another one still, but on the whole, perhaps we should have fewer and more precise goals, and the ranking of them, which I think is important. I'm also glad that Markku, you gave us a background on how the situation is for the climate and the urge for the whole society to work with these questions. And also a reminder from Leena with your work within the LIVIND, which is truly important. I have been reflecting. Matti, you sent us the questions about what living heritage is of importance to you, and you know, when a new government is elected, you ask all the newly appointed ministers, what is your favorite book, what is your favorite film, what has been important to you? And most of them find something from the lists, or from what other people say are important films or books, or perhaps they have personal experiences. But I was so glad that one said that, you know, that's a very private question. and cultural experiences are very private to its nature. I mean, to have some kind of a relation to a book, deep relation to a book, a film or an artwork, you have to explain what you yourself felt, or what your own experiences, which could be of a very private nature, of course. But apart from that, I will give two examples of elements that I would like to highlight. And one is on a professional level. I was so happy to see that the tradition of Ukrainian borscht cooking was put on the urgent safeguarding list in 2022 for obvious reasons. One thing is that I like borscht. I mean, the beetroot soup with some good bread and perhaps something suitable to drink to it. But also that we could, in this forum where we often find grounds for arguing and creating conflicts, we could all unite that this we need to safeguard this very element due to the situation and the war in Ukraine. So I was really happy that this could go so swiftly. But I would also like to point out one of the elements from our national inventory, the polska, which is both form of music and dance. And I've heard during these 2 days in Kaustinen, and I've heard the polska being played. And it always reminds me that this time signature, this ba ba ba, is something that follows for all Swedes through all of our life, through the Christmas drinking song, Hej tomtegubbar slå I glasen, to Vår vinda friska leka och viska. So it's something that is, we don't think of it, but the polska is somewhere close to our heartbeats. But polska is a Swedish tradition, but it's also in many ways a European tradition and a global tradition. Polska in itself means that dancers from Poland. So that means something to me personally, but I also think it's something that that is a good example of what ICH is. It's very personal, it's regional, but it's also global. So Polska is my other good example. Thanks.
Thank you, and sorry for the personal question, but that was kind of the idea that you can't hide behind your professional excellency, and when we get a little personal kind of a level more to this discussion. Thank you. And John, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much for a very interesting discussion. Obviously, the thing that I've learned from this discussion most strikingly is that the work of outreach in connection with the campaign hasn't sufficiently been done, since not everyone is aware of the campaign, and in particular not necessarily aware of the document published in 2022, which contains the text of what we call the zero draft of a culture goal, with explicit wording for the goal itself and for 10 targets, 8 specific and 2 transversal. If you want to look that up, go to Culture Goal 2030, all attached, .net, and look under the resources whatever the phrase is. Anyway, the link resources on that page will take you to the various documents published by the campaign, and you will find sort of sixth down in chronological reverse order. You will find the document published in 2022. I'll be happy to send it to you, Markku. It contains explicit wording, which again was defined as a zero draft, so it is just a campaigning tool. And at this stage, the two levels of campaigning are first in the direction of states to get recognition in terms of potential relevance, and in the direction of stakeholders to get critical feedback. It needs a lot more work, and as I was saying at the end of my presentation earlier, the next 6 months are the time frame within which that work of consultation, including critical feedback, is really important, because again, the time is much shorter than it seems. To quote a famous poem from W.H. Auden, it's later than you think. The sky is darkening, like sky. I can't remember the words. Anyway, it's all about the future falling like rain from a darkening sky, and it's always later than you think it is. In this case, it's definitely later than you think. In terms of elements of cultural heritage, I think I have a bias from my social science training towards an interest in change rather than continuity. And this probably colours my perspective. And one thing I've been thinking about a lot since I got here on Thursday, because this is a music festival after all, and we were discussing yesterday in the seminar issues to do with music, is how the transformations of musical practice, including the very radical technological transformations, are compatible with continuity. And I think that goes to the heart of music within intangible cultural heritage, and also connects, because it's all personal, the mushrooms, the boats, and so on. It connects also to my own practice as a very amateur musician. There's a very interesting podcast which you can find on internet. I don't have on YouTube. I don't have the reference in mind, but you'll find it easily enough with the keywords. Where some British guy whose name I can't remember, so I'm not helping you find the podcast here, did a long interview with someone many of you have probably heard of, the drummer Bill Bruford. I presume he's a well-known name to many of you. Drummer, among other things, for Yes and for King Crimson in the 1970s and 1980s. In my personal view, but it's shared by many, probably one of the most significant prog rock drummers of the past 50 years. And it was very interesting that Bruford talked for about an hour about his career, his approach to drumming, his understanding of the role of percussion within music, the people he played with, all sorts of things. But one of the key themes in the whole podcast was his emphasis on technology and how it had changed music. And he made a very simple comment that resonated with me, because I was a young amateur musician in the early 80s, at a time when 4-track recording was a really big deal. You had to either buy some pretty expensive equipment which we couldn't afford, or find someone who could give you access to it for a very short period of time. So you might have 4 hours of recording time with your 4-track recorder. And if you wanted to buy it with all the attendant equipment, you were talking serious 5 figures in pounds, euros, serious 6 figures in francs or krona back then. Now, and I have one of these at home, I have a multi-track digital recorder which is technically 8 tracks, which cost me 200 euros. And with the software that cost me $69 for a lifetime license, those 8 tracks basically become an infinite number of tracks, because you can just overdub as often as you want. So there's been a 100-fold reduction in the cost of making music. So now anyone can do things that were available only to professionals 40 years ago. This clearly changes how music is made, produced, circulated, and consumed. is this a kind of rupture in the transmission of music as intangible heritage? And the answer is a striking no. Because of course the new technologies don't disconnect musical practices from older musical traditions. They just create new bridges. Sometimes in the form of very crude appropriation. You know, sample something from a tradition that you're completely unconnected to, stick it on a beat and call it a hit record. But that interplay between continuity and change, in this case mediated by technology, is I think at the heart of the kinds of things we need to be discussing. Sometimes heritage is perceived as very past-oriented, very static, very conservative. And sometimes it can be in its discourses and regulatory practices. But at the same time, living heritage is living precisely insofar as it incorporates patterns of change, including radical change, whether or not mediated by technology. And yet, this hangs together. The way in which it hangs together is, I think, at the heart of the kinds of things we need to be looking at, discussing, researching, fostering, and learning from. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So, very interesting elements and ideas. I think we will continue with Markku again, the same round or the order. I will ask us, how can you see, you all have not joined the festival, and we are here now in the festival setting, that what has come to your mind to combine from out there at the festival, what we see, what is there, the linkages between sustainable development? Can you bring something, what role has folk music, or actually John, you already kind of opened the musical side of it, but from your relation, can you see the linkage between practicing music and then the sustainability, or should we make like the kind of the build up the methodology to understand it better, or is it already visible? Please.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's a very good and sort of a pertinent question, actually. I think I was implying in my presentation that how I see the culture is really that the realm of the culture is where the freedom is expressed. So we know that, well, if we have a problem in our society, that usually is because we either are freezing our capacity to express ourselves, or that there is a kind of a strong ideology that comes and kind of overwhelms everything. And so, for me, my experience yesterday, because we came on yesterday and expressed it, I was reflecting in the back of my mind that this free expression of the music that is here, so tangible, tells actually something really fundamental about our capacity as human beings. We can obviously think of some other form of expression than music, but I think music is particular because everybody can do that. We all can do some sort of music. There is no sort of a limit to that. When you start playing tennis, and you are a very beginner, and I'm a bit of a tennis player, I know that it's very hard, it's almost impossible to do that, but the music is a different thing. And so it's a sort of a connector. Now think about the communication as a part of the human culture, and look at any organizations that have problems. I would say 80% of the problems that we observe in organizations are because of the communication problems. There is a manipulation or hiding of the information, whatever it is, but usually it is something very close to that. So being able to express freely creates a ground for communication, because it's not just that we are receiving music there, it's also that it engenders, it creates something with us, with a response. We start to tap our foot, or we start to do something like that. So that's a form of communication. And I think that if we are at earnest in expressing ourselves, without the agenda of the self-interest, we want to contribute. In that particular case, I think we cannot do any harm. The harm comes if there is a lot of self-interest that drives us. Well, don't have to think of Putin only, but you know. And that when distortion comes. But when we are able to express ourselves, we are actually sharing something universal. And this universal is that can be kind of a framed as a common good. Something of creating a space where we are well with each other. And when we are well with each other, we are also connecting to the nature. There is no such a vibrant, good, living culture that extracts nature. All these economies, societies that heavily extracts nature are something where they have lost their own soul, in a one way. They are not free in their true expression. So in that sense, we can start to come back that the real idea of the sustainability is that we need to help our societies and our cultures to express ourselves. And once we do that, then we get our culture harmonized, our human activities harmonized with the nature as well. This was something that was kind of like running around my head last evening, because it was such a fantastic experience.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Leena, please.
I'm going to take quite a practical standpoint on the matter and put a bit of my arts manager hat on my head. I think we're living really good times now here in Finland in terms of the message and the awareness of sustainability really breaking through in many kinds of organizations, and especially in the creative sector. One reason is that there's been a magnificent process of luovien alojen toimenpideohjelma ekologisen kestävyyden hyväksi, tai jotain sinne päin. So an action plan of ecological sustainability for creative economies, so by Uudenmaan Liitto, Sitra, Aalto University and others. So there's been a lot of research on what's been happening in the creative sector, including festivals, in terms of sustainability. So, and there was a 100-pager pre-research, and now they have published the action plan as well. Or for example, the Gemut network, they have a toolkit for a more sustainable music industry, and so on. So we're starting to have processes, projects, toolkits, publications for festival events. Carbon-wise events is the name of Hiiliviisas tapahtuma, is one of those guidebooks. So there's starting to be a lot of more information. So, I mean, looking at this from a point of view from a civil servant and working with the cultural sector and intangible heritage organizations, there's just so much we can do. And I think we are on the right track. And I mean, you know better how well Kaustinen Festival has been doing in terms of recycling or offering vegetarian food or in terms of traveling, how to make it easier to come over, not by with your own car, but to come with public transport and so on. So there are very many concrete ways we can do this, but I think we are living in such times where we just need to be aware, we need to get more information, and we need to speak about it. So thanks Matti and team for organizing this event, because we never get ready on this issue, no matter how much we work on it. And we all, I mean, we can start with wheel charts, or we can start with a nice chat on how could we do better. But it's just something we need to dig deeper and deeper and deeper, but everyone can do something about it, and we are in the beginning of the path and in different levels. But I mean, I just remember one workshop taking place in Paris a couple of months back, and sitting with a bunch of heritage professionals, and we got the task to think of how can we work better in terms of sustainability as heritage professionals. And there was one colleague of one European country who said, we don't do anything for this. It's just too much. We are so overwhelmed already now by all of the work. Someone else needs to do this. Or if we are to do something, we need more money to do it. And we were, many of us like, what? But I mean, different countries and different organizations, we are in different level, but I mean, there is only one direction we can go with this. It's later than you think.
Thank you. And I really like what John said earlier, like the positive way of thinking about greenwashing. That it's actually just adapting a language to a stakeholder, and by that, like, you really make a difference in the behavior also. So maybe we should, at least in my mind, greenwashing it has some kind of a negative sound to it, but maybe I should change that. And I think that this is something that also, Leena, you were talking that we need just loads of actions, and then everything will go forward slowly. Please, Martin.
I come to think of, I think it's SDG 11, Sustainable Cities and Societies. And I think in these, in many ways, troublesome times, we need physical places to meet, and we need reasons to meet, and we need common ground. And I think music and traditional music has shown to be a very good meeting place, both tangible and intangible. And I think the Kaustinen Festival that has been going on for 55 years has during the years shown to be a very inclusive festival, yet being a festival for the Kaustinen region, for this part of Finland, but also for the whole world. And I think we need more and more of these venues, these festivals, so that we can meet and have areas where we could meet on an equal level. And I think that's more and more important. So that's the sustainability aspect that comes to mind first on my behalf.
Thank you. Thank you, Martin. John?
Thank you. I was checking the poem, and of course I mixed up two different poems. The line, "It is later than you think," is not from the poem that I quoted the other bit of. It's from the remarkable poem, "Consider This and in Our Time," which is essentially a poem about...
So you created a new poem?
I created a new poem. People being mobilized for war and everything that means. It is later than you think, nearer that day, far other than that distant afternoon, amid a rustle of frocks and stamping feet, they gave the prizes to the ruined boys. It's a beautiful poem, very obscure and very interesting. What strikes me walking around the festival and looking at things, it reminds me that the worst enemy, the monstrous double of living heritage is kitsch. And the most real practical threat to living heritage is precisely kitsch. Kitsch in something like the sense in which Susan Sontag first famously theorized it. In other words, the tendency to reproduce traditional practices in identical form but with ironic distance, thereby reducing them to pure form and stripping them of the living dimension without which they are just, kind of puppets or straw practices. And this happens very often. There's a lot of kitsch in contemporary music, for instance, both serious and less serious. And there's a constant desire to escape kitsch by the search for authenticity, hence all the debates in early music, for instance, about which instruments to use and which tuning systems to adhere to, so that 440 hertz becomes a battle cry, positive or negative, as to how to perform early music. And the whole discourse about cultural appropriation is ultimately a discourse about kitsch also. You can respectfully perform things that are not yours, you can respectfully borrow from them, but just performing them verbatim, so to speak, with ironic distance, which is kitsch, is disrespectful and therefore bad. And that goes to the heart of a lot of current discussions, of course, about the circulation of traditional forms. Walking around this festival, I didn't see much kitsch. I saw a serious desire to engage with and have fun through traditional practices lived and not simply enacted. And that's reassuring to see young people whose concern for folk music is not to have a bit of fun by showing implicitly how superior they are to it, but actually to engage with it. And of course, if you do it seriously, you're probably going to transform it by doing it. And that's what makes it living heritage. That's what strikes me most here in this festival, and also the openness to things that by any normal standard would probably not be considered folk music, but fit very nicely within the festival, including Miljoner Sari, which we were watching with Leena yesterday, which is a pop group, not in any folk genre, in any traditional sense, though, because I had the benefit of Leena's translations of the lyrics, it's clear to me that thematically, Miljoner Sari resembles Bruce Springsteen. Thematically, not musically, though there are some possible musical semblances. And Bruce Springsteen is a bridge between folk and rock. Because the themes, ordinary lives, put into music, correspond to a certain kind of harmonic and melodic scheme, which is itself ordinary, not looking for virtuosity, but looking for a kind of authenticity and earthiness. And in that sense, pop can be folk too, so long as it's serious and respectful. So I think that word kitsch is actually a very useful word to organize critical discourse around. If it's kitsch, we're failing. And there's a lot of evidence that it's not, or at least doesn't have to be, kitsch.
Thank you. That's a very interesting dichotomy to think, and maybe for my summer holidays to try to put this concept to the twin sister of ICH. I think I really admire that. At this stage, there will be the next performance, so we will have to be closing. But there's room for one question from audience, if you have. Just anything that comes to mind? Or then, if not, I will just... there is a question, please. Nora will... Just, sorry, wait for the microphone. Just 1 second.
Thank you, Matti, and thanks everyone for this very interesting and really enlightening conversation. I have learned a lot as well, and I have many questions, but I will make one for, I guess in this case, John, since he talked about the SDG 18. And John, you mentioned that you mentioned how you see this SDG as a connector, and you also mentioned how the SDGs are pillarized in a way, so it's very much disconnected based on the sustainability framework, which is only 3 pillars, and then the culture pillar is missing. I was wondering if we are not talking enough about the negative effects of culture as well in these conversations. Are we see culture only as something good and positive? John mentioned that culture should be this connector. And I agree, but I also see culture as very much embedded in a lot of the things and practices and basically all the pillars of sustainability that we have also are connected to culture and culture practices. So I, in a way, see that culture is already connected, but how do we disconnect as well culture from those negative practices that are making sustainability impossible? So that's basically the question. It's this SG 18 a connector, or is it already connecting, and how do we disentangle the negative practices associated with culture?
Thank you very much.
Great question. And I checked the other poem, and it's incredibly appropriate to the question you asked, because it was written, of course, in the time of the shadow of the Second World War, which was coming but had not yet started, and it really resonates very much with our own time. It's from the poem The Two. So I'll just read a few lines, and you'll see how directly relevant it is to your question. The sky is darkening like a stain. Something is going to fall like rain, and it won't be flowers. When the green field comes off like a lid, revealing what was much better hid, unpleasant. And look behind you without a sound. The woods have come up on us standing round in deadly crescent. That sounds like a comment on the current politics of Europe, doesn't it? And it's a reminder that precisely because culture is so structuring of human life, everything bad we do is cultural. Of course it is. Culture provides the conditions, the language, the practices, the beliefs and the values for everything bad we do as well as everything good we do. I think that's very important to bear in mind. And Martin quoted a very important passage from the Convention on Intangible Cultural Heritage precisely to that effect, and that's what that passage means when saying that nothing in the Convention, or that everything in the Convention that is protected or recognized under the name Intangible Cultural Heritage must be compatible with international human rights standards, for instance. And many cultural practices aren't. You could easily make a list of destructive, negative cultural practices incompatible with internationally recognized human rights. So basically, yes, you're absolutely right. And we should never fall into the trap of thinking that culture is somehow the answer. What is possibly the answer, or part of the answer, to the questions of how to make the world a better place for everyone who lives in it, including non-humans, is to have a clear understanding of what makes cultural practices, cultural beliefs, values embedded in cultures compatible with a good life for all, including the connection between present and future generations that serves to define sustainability. So yeah, totally, 100% agree.
Thank you. Thank you for the question, and thank you, John, for the answer. Now it's our time to end this discussion, and thank you very much for all the panelists, and thank you, audience. We talked about the draft and the pillars in this seminar. I think we went forward with great examples from LIVIND project and really touched the kind of the grassroots level of safeguarding and really make it happen. Something that maybe we will continue talking will be the culture as common good, which was in the Mondial Cult Declaration, but we didn't go to that in this discussion, but that will continue. And then we were talking about the shadow goal, I think that was also, and I heard about this kind of the idea that we will keep the culture goal in our minds, whatever happens in the real life. So I think very important proceedings. Maybe I will end to this Markku's great kind of way of thinking about through the freedom of expression. That when we have the freedom of expression, we can dance, we can sing, we are comfortable with our cultural selves, then we will have the means to communicate. And then we will have a means to communicate peacefully on individual level, but also community level and national level or international level with this global level, which, as also mentioned here, is as very important now with this current situation of the world. But once again, thank you so much, our speakers, panelists, and also Annika, our speaker, and then the audience. And now you go leave the ICH at the festival. Thank you very much.